The commies are at it again, developing atomic capabilities. General Stavros has a Siberian informant who knows where the Soviet atomic processing facilities are hidden. Stavros insists on going to meet him, personally. Stubborn old mule thinks he's a damn field agent. Yeah. Damn. The Soviets must have gotten wind of the Stavros meeting. Intel received word of a large Soviet force moving to intercept. I told Stavros he'd get himself killed playing these spy games. Help him out any way you can. Once the old mule's back, use the information he's got and find and destroy the Red's atomic operations. Nukes, bases, convoys, everything. Kick those commies out of Siberia. For me.
Reinforcements have arrived. Reinforcements have arrived.
Yes.
Yeah? Let's rock! Chew on this! What's up?
Of course. Commander?
Let's rock!
Commander?
Yeah? Let's rock! Chew on this! Chew on this! Chew on this!
Yes. Move out. Move out.
What's up? Chew on this! Let's rock! Let's rock! Chew on this! Let's rock!
Commander? Move out. Move out.
Yeah? I'm there! I'm there!
Commander? Of course.
Yeah?
Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course.
Yes, sir!
Move out. Move out. Of course.
Yes, sir!
Of course. Move out. Of course.
What's up? Yes, sir!
Of course. Move out. Move out.
Yeah? Chew on this! Chew on this! Chew on this!
Yes.
I'm there!
Commander?
I'm there! What's up?
Of course. Move out. Of course.
Yeah?
Of course. Move out.
Yes, sir!
Move out.
What's up?
Move out. Of course. Of course. Of course. Move out. Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course.
Signal flare detected from the
Of
west.
course.
A-bomb launch
Move out.
detected.
Move out.
A-bomb launch
Of course.
detected.
Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course. Move out. Of course. Of course. Of course. Move out. Of course. Of course. Of
Reinforcements
course.
have
Of
arrived.
course. Move out. Of course.
What's up? Chew on this! Chew on this! Chew on this! I'm there! Yes, sir!
Move out. Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course.
Vehicle following.
Yeah? Yeah?
Of course.
Waiting order.
Yes, sir!
Of course.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir!
Move out.
Waiting order. Affirmative.
I'm there! I'm there! Let's rock! Let's rock!
Vehicle reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Yes, Acknowledged.
What's up?
Of course. Move out. Move out. Of course. 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 Of course.
A-bomb launch detected.
Of course. Of course. Move out. Of course. Move out. Of course. Of course. Of course. Yes.
I'm there. I'm there.
Commander?
I'm there. Let's rock.
Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledge. 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 Vehicle affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Waiting orders. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged.
Yes.
Reinforcements
I'm
have
there.
arrived.
I'm there. I'm there.
Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Awaiting orders. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Reporting. Yes, sir. Very well.
Yes.
I'm there. I'm there. Let's rock.
Yes, sir. Agree. Yes, sir. Awaiting order. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Reporting. Very well. Very well. Yes, sir. Agree. Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 Very well. At once. At once. Affirmative. Yes, sir. At once. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. 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 At once. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Reporting. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge.
Yeah? Let's rock.
Yes. Of course. Of course.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Yes, sir. Very well.
Yes.
I'm there.
Yes, sir. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Waiting order. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledge.
Yeah?
Of course. Of course.
What's up? I'm there.
Yes. Of course. Of course. Of course.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Let's rock. There.
Yes. Of course.
Yeah? Yes, sir. I'm there. Let's rock. Yeah?
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledged.
Commander? Of course. Commander? Of course. Commander?
Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Acknowledge. Affirmative. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Acknowledged. Affirmative. 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 Affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Of course.
What's up? I'm there. Yes, sir.
At once. Very well.
Commander? Of course. Of course. Move out. Of course.
Yeah?
Yes, sir. At once. Reporting. Affirmative.
What's up? I'm there.
Commander? Of course. Commander?
Mission accomplished.